Here are all of the banks that are being utilized to build this ledger with consensus. So to sit there and wonder if some of these banks have connections, are they going to settle with this asset or this asset or this asset? Take a look at this list. Look at the connections, whether it's XRP, HBAR, XLM, or QNT. Some of them have direct or indirect connections one way or another.
Do you know how it feels to get bullied? Do you understand how it feels to get bullied? Do you understand? There's people out here in this world really getting bullied. Are you okay? I want y'all to apologize right now. Apologize right now or get out my classroom.
We shouldn't have worn that hat.
Apologize right now. Get the fuck out my classroom.
My sleeves. You want to call me out? Sit down and shut the fuck up, bitch. Fata Kedavra.
I am sick of this shit. Fuck Wall Street. Fuck you all.
Very good, very good. And Morten, going to you, I mean, obviously the BIS has been very active in this space of new platforms, not only working with central banks, but also driving public-private partnerships. How do you see the opportunity? Is that aligned with what John and Abitha have outlined?
Yes, I think it's very comforting that we agree very much with what we just heard from the private sector. So we're also trying to drive innovation through tokenization, and we think there's particular opportunity in the area, as you mentioned, cross-border payments, where we're leading a big project that's called Project Agora, where we have no less than 7 central banks, over 40 private sector banks, all getting together around the same table to try and see if there's ways that we can make progress towards making cross-border payments cheaper, faster, and more transparent. So, yeah,
Great.
Very much aligned.
Great. And
The BIS explaining Project Agora. This is one of the Bank of International Settlements experiments. They're essentially bringing together multiple central banks and commercial banks to test whether a unified ledger in and of itself has tokenized commercial bank deposits and central bank money, can actually be utilized to make cross-border payments more efficient. The goal is simple. They want to cut costs, they want to speed up transfers, and make transactions more transparent. With this unified ledger that is containing the tokenized commercial bank deposits and the central bank monies, they still need a bridge asset. That is simply just the settlement token the settlement asset that they want to use, right? The central bank money or the tokenized commercial bank deposits. That's the settlement that they want to use, but it still requires a bridge asset. Let's go into the BIS's Innovation Hub, where they start to talk about Project Agora. So what is Project Agora? Agora is a groundbreaking initiative led by the BIS. It involves 7 central banks and a large group of private sector companies. The project aims to test the desirability, feasibility, and viability of a multi-currency unified ledger for wholesale cross-border payments. BIS has brought in 7 central banks. We have the Bank of France, we got the Bank of Japan, the Bank of Korea, the Bank of Mexico, Swiss National Bank, the Fed Reserve of New York, and the Bank of England. What is the project's objective? Well, the project's objective is to demonstrate how a unified ledger could enhance the efficiency of business and regulatory process in the corresponding banking chains. Now we see here, right? The project aims to build a technical prototype to test wholesale cross-border payments to demonstrate the following: the ability to represent tokenized commercial and wholesale central bank money on a unified ledger that meets technical and business requirements. They want atomic cross-border transactions between currency areas, leveraging a single currency pair or a vehicle currency in a way that preserves the depositor's bank relationships. The ability to streamline pre-validation efforts, reducing duplication efforts in the payment chain without changing the existing standards or requirements. They also want to improve the efficiencies in complying with sanctions, screenings, as well as anti-money laundering and the rules on countering financing of terrorism. The BIS description of what Project Agora is what the panelist is talking about. The BIS is testing a unified ledger with tokenized deposits and CBDCs. This supports the theory, again, that the Rails future monetary system, they're being built right now. This is why we talk about that it's about the infrastructure first and then the settlement assets second. Because if the infrastructure, if the highway is not built, then the cars cannot actually drive on the highway.
How to partner with you on that project and a big global collaboration that's certainly going on. Now, if we think then about these new platforms, there's clearly an opportunity here, and an opportunity that's particularly been driven by the capabilities of DLT and blockchain. But it's not only about the technology, right? There is also risk in this process, and the risk of creating walled gardens, or the risk of creating kind of new gatekeepers. So I'm curious to think about what sort of checks or governance maybe is required in this space. So maybe Morten, I'll come back to you on this. How do you see the sort of that aspect playing out alongside the technology and ensuring the right structures are in place?
Well, first, I think payments, clearing, and settlement systems are really about three things from an economic point of view. It's about economics of scale, economics of scope, and economics of networks. And so you really need to think hard about how you try and achieve these things. But so once you have that, I think you can think about it's well tested in economics of how you regulate those things. So you need not only to have good governance in place, but if it is something that is a natural monopoly, it should be a monopoly, but then it needs to be regulated in a safe and sound way that provides open access to as many people that needs to have access to the system.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And maybe Fernando, I could bring you in at this stage. Obviously, you're coming from more of a kind of a DeFi background in this, and have been thinking about how maybe decentralized models can help us here, in particular in cross-chain working. So I wonder if you could share any insights you think about, how that can help in this kind of new world of platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I think I want to clarify that decentralization and governance are not incompatible.
Right.
They're not mutually exclusive. Even what we are trying to do for oracles, where are distributed, we have a pool of node operators. But those node operators need to follow an onboarding process. We need to meet a certain criteria. Otherwise, we couldn't serve our FI and FMI clients. It cannot be a random player that does not meet any SLAs or is doing funny things in terms of money laundering, stuff like that. So when it comes to the gatekeeping, I think that is there to stay. The gatekeeper could be an FMI. The gatekeeper could be a pool of node operators running a distributed protocol. That is correct. So I think governance is here to stay. It's just the gatekeeper is going to take on different shapes and forms.
He says that decentralization and governance is not incompatible, right? The gatekeepers are here to stay, meaning that decentralization doesn't necessarily mean that things are chaotic. Even in decentralized systems, there still is a need for governance, right? Someone has to decide who can run the nodes, enforce the service level standards. Someone has to decide who's going to kick out the bad actors. So while the blockchains reduce concentration, it doesn't eliminate the gatekeepers, meaning that the gatekeepers are just going to take on new forms. So if we jump over to this Swift document, Swift's unlocked potential of tokenization with successful blockchain experiments. Cooperative demonstrations secure a scalable way to connect multiple blockchains for movement of tokenized assets around the world. Swift can provide a single point of entry for financial institutions moving tokenized assets while leveraging existing secure infrastructures. Swift says while tokenization is in its infancy, 97% of institutional investors believe that it will revolutionize asset management and be a positive force for the industry, not least because of its potential to increase efficiency, reduce costs, and by enabling fractional ownership, it's going to open up more opportunities to its investors. Swift has a successful demonstration that it can provide a single point of entry access to multiple networks using existing secure infrastructure for institutions to support the development of tokenized assets. When combining Swift and Chainlink's CCIP, we were able to show this new level of interoperability across various blockchains is now possible with minimal resources, even from the largest banks and market infrastructures. So Swift's case study is saying that Chainlink is decentralized, but it's not a free-for-all, right? The node operators still have to communicate. They have to have an agreements. There has to be some sort of governance, and they have to meet the standards. Swift adds that additional governance layer on top of all of that. It's showing us that decentralization and governance can absolutely coexist, and this is exactly what the panelist is saying, that sometimes decentralization doesn't necessarily mean that it's the wild, wild west.
So I guess then if gatekeepers are here to stay, then I guess it sort of opens up a bit of a question, doesn't it? That, you know, are platforms enough, or do we need to then have more of a kind of mutualized type of infrastructure in this space? So maybe, Jack, if I could bring you in at this point, I mean, what's your view on the need for mutualized infrastructure and how that might mitigate some of these risks?
Yeah, I mean, I think from an opportunity standpoint, I think there's no debating kind of what's been discussed as a group, but I think over the past 5, 6, 7 years, there's been a number of kind of fits and starts from the industry to try and solve or kind of coalesce around certain shared ledgers. And one of the key challenges, and you know, from the observations we have, the conversations with many of the banks, is which of these initiatives should we be investing in? Should we be participating in? Which of those should we not? If you participate in every single thing that comes across, you have a full-time job of just trying to connect all these different things. And then you have this world of fragmented liquidity. So the original vision of solving some of the pain points, you have this paradox that you're actually kind of creating further fragmentation of liquidity. And so part of this is, at least from our perspective, is to have a bit of a need for a shared common infrastructure. And quite frankly, when you look at what Swift was introduced for 50 years ago, from a messaging standpoint, we think that there's a similar need for the industry today. And so we did make a tiny announcement yesterday, but this is something that we're also looking to work with the community on through a shared infrastructure layer for the Swift community as well. And I think there's kind of key elements around this where you have a kind of a neutral cooperative type of entity that's not necessarily competing with various institutions, but you actually have cooperative ownership, a neutral governance type of structure with an institution that is not kind of necessarily kind of profit maximizing by kind of the objective, right? So there's this kind of a shared utility type of concept that I think is quite important and something that there's obviously a massive network. To Morin's point, I think this piece around network effects and scale is critical. And so when you have the number of institutions able to participate, that's something that will help drive success of some of these initiatives.
He says that Swift announced that there is a shared infrastructure layer for the Swift community. So Swift already admitted that they're not just doing messaging services anymore, right? They're moving into building shared ledgers themselves. It's a big shift because Swift already connects to 11,000 banks. If they add blockchain-based ledger, a blockchain-based ledger, then suddenly tokenized money has a highway directly into the banking systems that Swift already supports. The banks won't have to reinvent their own process. They'll just plug into Swift's brand new infrastructure. Swift introduces a blockchain-based ledger. So the blockchain-based shared ledger, they're starting with a consensual prototype with consensus. This was the big news that came out this week, right? Everyone said, oh, Swift is building the 24/7 cross-border payments blockchain with consensus. That's it. XRP's out. XLM is out. Okay, we're going to get a little bit into that, right? The ledger will be built for interoperability, both with existing and emerging networks, while maintaining the trust and resilience of compliance with Swift and the secure functioning of the global finance, right? So combining a shared ledger with Swift's existing APIs and ISO 222 creates an even more powerful construct. So what is Swift's blockchain-based shared ledger? It's a blockchain proving that a shared real-time record of transactions between financial institutions designed for instant, always-on, cross-border payments and tokenized value. Now, let's get into this. Swift to add blockchain-based ledger to its infrastructure stack and groundbreaking moves to accelerate the scale benefits of digital finance across more than 200 countries and territories worldwide. If you're sitting there thinking, what about XRP? We're going to get into this. We're going to explain to you what exactly this means, right? So SWIFT, with a group of more than 30 financial institutions globally, will develop a shared digital ledger with the initial focus on real-time 24/7 cross-border payments. SWIFT will work with Consensus on the prototype of the ledger. SWIFT's focus is on the infrastructure. The types of tokens that will be exchanged on the ledger is the territory of commercial and central banks, and SWIFT will work with them on how to complement and make sure the use of this new infrastructure. I'm going to read that one more time for you guys. The types of tokens that will be exchanged on the ledger is the territory of the commercial and central banks. If you're not catching up with what we're talking about, SWIFT, Chainlink, and Consensus are coming together, as well as the other 30 financial global institutions, right, to build the infrastructure, to build the highways. Now, what actually transacts and settles on the ledger is the territory of the commercial and central banks. As we discussed earlier, if they want it to be tokenized deposits or central bank digital currencies or regulated stablecoins or a digital asset, then it's up to the central banks and the commercial banks to decide what asset, what settlement asset do they want to be settled on this ledger that they are developing. So no, XRP is not out. No, XLM is not out. No, HBAR is not out. These are the settlement assets that thrive in this type of environment. Now, I think this is going to be pretty interesting, okay? Right here talks about all of the banks that are working on this shared ledger, and I did you guys a solid and went through each and every single one of these to see if there is a direct or indirect connection to Ripple, to Hedera, to Quant, to Stellar, right? Are these banks working with our assets? Are they? ABSA, I didn't see anything, right? I did not find any connections to Ripple, Stellar, Hedera, or Quant, right? Let's go into Akbank. This one is very clear, right? Akbank was the first Turkish bank to sign with Ripple back in 2017 for international transfers. A direct Ripple connection. ANZ. ANZ has a history with Ripple too. For you guys that are looking at this saying, what's up with the highlights? All the orange is Ripple. All the yellow is Quant. And all of the purple is Hedera. ANZ, right? ANZ has worked with Ripple as well. They were one of the early banks testing Ripple's tech back to 2015. Santander, right? This is one of Ripple's showcase banks, one of their highlight banks. They built UnPay, which is the FX app, on Ripple, and it's been running for years. This is one of the deepest ongoing partnerships. Bank of America. So Bank of America is more of a indirect connection with Ripple. But Bank of America was a part of Ripple's Global Payments Steering Group, which was basically Ripple's early governance council, right? So Bank of America was essentially on Ripple's early governance council. And there is a report that Bank of America also ran a pilot with Ripple, but it's not as visible as Santander. Banorte, maybe I'm saying that right, found nothing on that. BBVA was mentioned among the early adopters of Ripple's network back to 2017. Still a Ripple connection. We're going to go into BNP Paribas. Has a partnership with Quant. So Quant partnered with SIA and Nexi, and that essentially was opening up the interoperability highway or path to BNP and hundreds of other European banks. So it's indirect, but it's still there. BNY Mellon. Hello? RLUSD, BNY Mellon. Bradesco. So this one is actually pretty interesting. They worked with Ripple on different types of corridors, and they were also one of the first banks mentioned in IBM's WorldWire project, also developed on Stellar. So this one actually has a connection to both Ripple and Stellar. Citibank, right? Indirect connection to Quant. So Citibank was involved with LACChain program, which was essentially the Latin America's CBDC interoperability platform. And LACChain partnered with Quant for interoperability. So this gives Citi a Quant connection. Commerce Bank, I found nothing on that. Credit Agorical, same story as BNP. Through the SIA-Nexi, Quant's integration. This is another indirect connection to Quant's overledger. DBS Bank, for you HBAR holders out there, here we go. I found one for you guys. DBS is a pretty big one for Hedera. They're actually on Hedera's governing council, and they also run a node on Hedera. Deutsche Bank, not sure. I didn't find any public connection for that. Emiratis and NBD, there are reports that Ripple has connections there. Dubai's banks were very early to adopt DLT technology, and they were listed as a RippleNet participant. First Abu Dhabi Bank, I found nothing. First Rand Bank, I found nothing. HSBC has been very active in DLT technology. Connections to Ripple as well. I can't even pronounce this one. Iota Un Banco. Oh, they joined RippleNet in 2018 for cross-border payments. JP Morgan Chase is pretty different. They don't use Ripple, they don't use Stellar, they don't use Hedera, they don't use Quant. They have their own rails with Onyx. We all know that the JPM coin essentially was trying to become that competitor for XRP. But the issue with that is that it operates in the same silos that the traditional banking infrastructure that we have now exists. It's centralized by JP Morgan Chase, going after the same things as Ripple. One, they lack the liquidity. Two, why would Santander? Why would Bank of America? Why would Wells Fargo? Why would HSBC? Why would they want to use a JP Morgan Chase infrastructure? They don't. That's the competition. If JP Morgan Chase is going to make it, it's going to benefit JP Morgan Chase. So the JPM coin failed. They tried to come out as competition for Ripple, absolutely failed. Mizuho! So this is one of the Ripple connections with the banks. They were mentioned very early in some Ripple-related collaborations. MUFG signed with Ripple, Japanese-Brazilian payments company. NatWest is another Quant's SIA-Nexi connection, right? Quant's integration through NatWest has a OCBC. We're going to go into the Royal Bank of Canada. So the RBC was a founding member of Ripple's GPSG. Saudi Awal Bank. Hope I'm saying this. They actually launched a Ripple-powered instant cross-border payments utilizing US dollar highways. So this one is actually pretty fucking strong. They launched a Ripple-powered instant cross-border payment. Shaihan Bank. Here comes the HBAR holders. Run a stablecoin pilot on Hedera with some of the partners in Asia. I'm not even going to try to pronounce this one either. This one's a little bit more indirect with Quant. It's the same thing as all the rest. Forge has been very deep into tokenization, and they're actually doing that through the SIA-Nexi, and they have a Quant interoperability path. So indirect connection, sure, but Quant is still the highway of which they're planning on utilizing. Standard Chartered, direct Ripple connection. They didn't only invest into Ripple, but they also ran payment pilots, and they were able to prove that these payments were able to be completed in under 10 seconds. TD Bank as well was responsible for participating in Ripple's GPSG era, but they don't have anything that's live or anything that's public like Santander does, but they were involved with the early committee for Ripple as well. UOB, I found nothing. And Wells Fargo. Well, Wells Fargo was also working with R3 Corda, and as well as R3 Corda Settler, right? R3 Corda Settler integrated XRP. So Wells Fargo had a pathway to Ripple, but there is a connection there. And finally, we get to Westpac, another early Ripple adopter. They tested Ripple back in like 2016 or something. Here are all of the banks that are being utilized to build this ledger with consensus. So to sit there and wonder if some of these banks have connections, are they going to settle with this asset or this asset or this asset? Take a look at this list. Look at the connections, whether it's XRP, HBAR, XLM, or QNT. Some of them have direct or indirect connections one way or another. But this was one of the biggest news that came out, guys. They're sitting there, oh, XRP has nothing to do with this. The types of tokens that will be exchanged on the ledger is the territory of the commercial and central banks.